Hey, it's time for another episode of All About Hamlet. Welcome back to my channel. So I am Carly Stevens, the English nerd. We are on to Act 2, Scene 1 in our series. So finally, Act 2. Act 1 is all about setting the scene in Shakespeare's Hamlet, and it ends with Act 1, Scene 5, which I talked about last week, that is the complication of the play. So if you're familiar with tragic structure, you know that it has to introduce, and then there's this rising action. The complication is what sets off that rising action, sets the plot off in a distinct direction, and when the ghost of Hamlet's father tells him that he was murdered, that, my friends, is a complication. So that brings us to Act 2. The assumption, of course, with these videos is that you have read and or watched this scene already. I'll be summarizing, yes, but the primary purpose of these videos is not to summarize. It's to add some additional conversation, some insight into things that you should already be aware of. So Act 2, Scene 1 starts a couple months after the events of Act 1. So some time has gone by, a few weeks, and Hamlet is starting to act crazy, but he doesn't really appear in this scene. In fact, it's all about Polonius and his family in this scene, so without further ado, let's dive in, shall we? It begins with Polonius and Reynaldo. Reynaldo is a super teeny character in this story. He is the manservant of Polonius. Reynaldo is given money and notes and such for Laertes, who is currently in Paris. If you remember from Act 1, Scene 2, and the scene after that, he says he's going to Paris, so that's where he is. And Polonius wants to not only give him money and send him what he needs, but also check up on his behavior, which is a super Polonius-y thing to do. Polonius is so incredibly nosy. It's just out of control. Now, this scene, for a long time I thought, well, what's the point of this scene? You can't really see that. It sets up Polonius, or establishes him as a really nosy parent, and not a great one, because he asks Reynaldo to find out all of Laertes' friends, the other Danes in Paris, and say, oh, is Laertes the one who goes and does all these terrible things? And if the friends say, oh yeah, that's Laertes all over, then they'll know for sure that he's doing bad stuff in Paris. But if the friends say, no, that sounds nothing like the Laertes we know, then he's behaving himself. But the things that Polonius tells Reynaldo to accuse him of are kind of intense. I just want to show you some of that. Okay, so this is, well, at least in my copy, 1.5 pages into this scene, and Polonius says, okay, yes, he's explaining at length exactly how Reynaldo should do this. Poor Reynaldo is clearly fed up, but he says, why don't you accuse him of gaming and drinking and swearing and drabbing? Now, for our modern audiences, we may just gloss right over that because it's not a common word. It means whoring, not a thing that you would want to accuse your son of, even if you were perfectly innocent of this. It's going to cause negative rumors to run rampant all over Paris, probably, but Polonius doesn't think of it that way. He thinks that his plan is brilliant. He's going to secretly figure out exactly what's wrong with Laertes' behavior, if there is anything, and then he'll put a stop to that, you can bet. This scene actually reminds me a little bit, of course it does, of Return of the Jedi, episode 6 of Star Wars, when C-3PO is trying to talk to the Ewoks about some basic stuff, and Han Solo keeps tapping him on the shoulder and saying, oh, don't forget to tell him this, don't forget to say this, make sure that they know this. What's taking you so long? And that's Polonius with Reynaldo. Reynaldo's trying to get out of there, and Polonius just keeps saying, oh, don't forget this, make sure that you do this. Here's exactly how I want you to find out Laertes' behavior in Paris. It's pretty over the top. Polonius even loses his train of thought, obviously, as he's going. Wait, what was I about to say? By the mass, I was about to say something. Where did I leave? He loses his train of thought. He's the only character who obviously loses his train of thought in this entire play, which, again, I think says something about him. At the end of this part between Polonius and Reynaldo, there's a really great line. There actually is a line that has a lot to do with not only Polonius's character, but also the way that Hamlet goes about things, and it has a lot to do with the play in general. And that is that he intends, that is, Polonius intends, by indirections to find directions out. By indirections, find directions out. That's fantastic and explains his character and Hamlet's character super well. By indirections, find directions out. So finally, Reynaldo can get out of there. It takes him forever. And as soon as he leaves, Ophelia comes in. So this scene is essentially broken up into two. Part one is Polonius and Reynaldo talking through what he should be doing in Paris. And then part two of that same scene is Ophelia, who has been very disturbed by Hamlet and his behavior toward her. Ophelia runs in such a tizzy that Polonius immediately says, What's the matter? Are you okay?" And Ophelia describes what has just happened to her as she was sewing in her closet. Now, the word closet can kind of throw you off, but it's an important word to understand for Hamlet. A closet is just a personal bedroom, so she's not weirdly sewing in her closet like some gnome. She's just in her bedroom, hanging out, sewing some stuff, when Hamlet comes in completely crazily. So I want you to be able to picture this scene. I'm going to show it to you using some of my favorite characters, so let's take a look. Yes, that's right, I'm going to be using Robin Hood to play Hamlet, and Lady Cluck to play Ophelia. Now, hopefully this works for you. If it doesn't, that's fine, but I love these characters, so it's happening. So we have Hamlet over here, his doublet all embraced. He's supposed to be a mess. You could never be a mess, Robin. I love you. It says that his knees are knocking each other. He has a look so piteous that it seems that he's been loosed out of hell, to speak of horrors. And so, see that look? Horrors. He comes before her. So then he holds her by the wrist. Holds her by the wrist, goes to the length of all his arm, just stares at her as though he would draw her face, little shaking of her arm, and then his head thrice waving up and down. He raised a sigh, so horrifying that it seemed to shatter all his bulk and his being. I don't know why she's looking so smug, but could have chosen somebody else, I guess. And then, with his head over his shoulder turned, like this, he found his way out of the room without his eyes. For out of doors he went without their helps, and to the last bended their light on me, she says. Bye. Pretty weird, I'd say. Now, the thing there are a lot of things that amaze me about this. One, why would Hamlet start his craziness rampage with Ophelia? What did she really do to him? I mean, she broke up with him. She cut off communication with him, as Polonius had told her to do before, but really, Ophelia? Does she have anything to do with the murder of his father? I don't think so. The second thing that amazes me is Polonius's reaction. I inherited this comic book of Hamlet, so I'm just going to show you in a couple panels Polonius's response to this. Love? Are you kidding me? What kind of experience has Polonius had with love? He keeps dropping all these hints about how he knows the craziness, the madness of love. I was this close to madness when I was in love myself. I need to know the story. Where is Mrs. Polonius? What on earth is he actually referring to? He doesn't seem like somebody who would be so incredibly in love that he would lose his mind, but he keeps bringing that up as a possibility. So much so that he thinks that Hamlet must be crazy for the love of Ophelia. This is the first theory about Hamlet's madness, and so it's worth paying attention to. We get 3 theories in all about why Hamlet might be acting crazy. All of them are wrong, but we'll see that his mom gets the closest when we get to her guess in Act 2, Scene 2. I feel really bad for Ophelia here. She didn't really do anything to deserve this, so she's quite broken up about it. Polonius, though, who wants to take charge, in every way, decides that it would be a good idea to tell the king and queen what is happening and why he thinks that Hamlet is acting this way. So that brings us to the end of Act 2, Scene 1. It's a pretty basic scene, just a couple of major pieces to it. So hopefully you got something out of this discussion. Be sure to check out my other videos on the topic and subscribe if you have not already. Like this video if you liked it. Add any comments. I want this to be a conversation. So if you have anything to add or anything that you would like me to address in some later videos, please do let me know. Until then, I'll see you on Monday.